Greetings, lords and ladies. I wanted to bring your attention to something, a small but very important detail regarding the character of Karlach, because there was something in the new reveal of the Karlach character that a lot of people have either ignored or not paid attention to, and that is a strange shift in her story. And I think it's substantial enough to make a video about, shockingly. That's why I'm making it. Namely, the initial description of Karlach's situation, which was that she fled the Nine Hells, Avernus, was both a slave and a soldier to Zariel, the archdevil who rules Avernus. And it's very important here to note this, that when she arrived in Toril, in Faerun, she seemingly lost her powers. Now let's look at this cutscene here and see what she has to say.
Back in the Blood War, my commander gave me what I needed to get the job done. I have fire running through my veins. I don't work for her anymore, so I'm back to relying on muscle and steel. I'll be just fine.
So she says that when she was still in the Nine Hells, she was given what she needed by Zariel, the archdevil ruler of Avernus and the prosecutor of the Blood War. But now that she's on her own, she has to rely on muscle and steel. That was the early access Karlach. What has happened now? Well, we can look at the image and we see a lot of things going on. On the one hand, we see the scars, which, fair enough, she's a Blood War veteran, and the Blood War is perhaps the most brutal and vile war that is ongoing in the multiverse, even as we speak. But there's that strange glow going on her chest. And if we put two and two together, the appearance, as well as the information that was dropped from the PlayStation blog, which states the following: Karlach is an example of an origin character who, if not played, can be recruited into your party. With a giant battle axe in hand, this battle-worn tiefling barbarian packs a mean blow. Some say it's her years of experience on the scorched battlefields of the Blood War. And here's where it gets really interesting, again. It could also be the unholy machine that pumps hellish fire through her veins, a gift from the archdevil she once served. But be careful. If she gets too worked up, she could destroy anything she touches, and that includes you. So by now you've caught on to what's going on here. In early access, she was deprived of her powers. She says she's on her own. She has to rely on muscle and steel, and she'll be fine. But when she was actively prosecuting the Blood War, she had her gifts from Zariel. And apparently, based on the little information we have received, this gift in particular entails having hellish fire course through her veins. And apparently it's unstable. The heavy implication here being that it also affects her personality and how she interacts with others, as it states that much here. If she gets too worked up, she could destroy anything she touches, and that includes you. Well, I have to say that this entire new arc, as it were, to her story has made the character of Karlach a lot more interesting to me. In addition to how well-crafted her character model is, really suits her, fits her. I'd say she's running number 2 after Shadowheart for me. It also makes sense, because you have to consider that the archdevils of the Nine Hells are basically demigods. Basically, they are the equivalent in power of demigods, with the exception of Asmodeus, who is a greater deity, a proper deity, who rules all of the Nine Hells from his fortress in Nessus, the 9th layer. All the rest of them are basically demigods, and a demigod is nothing to sneeze at. If Zariel has, quote-unquote, given her a gift, as it were, and it seems that way, because she has that fiery glow going on in her chest area, there's no way she can just leave the service of Zariel and be perfectly okay. Again, initially, I have to rely on muscle and steel. Well, that's just not how it works. An archdevil is much more powerful than your average mortal higher-up, so there's no way Zariel was simply going to say, okay, I'll let her escape. Now, obviously, at least in early access, Zariel tries to send her minions, these faux worshippers of the god Tyr, former worshippers is a better way of putting it, to capture her, and that's part of her story arc. But my sense is there has to be a lot more to the character than just her being a fugitive from Zariel and her having a tadpole, because if you think about the other characters, they all have something pretty big going on, in some sense. Gale has a magical bomb in his chest, as it turns out. Will is, well, a warlock bound to his patron, which is kind of a big deal. Astarion is a vampire spawn and bound to the will of Cazador ultimately, until now, right? And Lizelle doesn't, apart from the tadpole, have anything obvious, but the fact that she's going to run into a lot of conflict within the Githyanki hierarchy and general Githyanki religious order is an issue in of itself, because if and when she defects from that, which she probably will have to, that's going to be a big deal. Then I think a major component of the story arc of Karlach is going to be her actually extricating herself from the chains of slavery, which she technically is still under as long as she has this machine of fire coursing through her veins from Zariel. And here's another point to be made that adds even more layers to this scenario. What if, and I think it's going to be very likely, it'd be very weird if she weren't, what if Karlach is a Zariel tiefling, one of the 3 subraces of tieflings available? You have Asmodeus, Mephistopheles, and Zariel. It would make perfect sense. After all, the Zariel tiefling is the subrace that gets a bonus to strength, which is really useful for a barbarian. But it would also imply that her bloodlines might have some relationship to this quote-unquote gift of fire that she has coursing through her veins, and might also make her more susceptible to the commands or the interests of Zariel. Bloodlines are important in a universe such as Dungeons & Dragons, and eldritch powers have the ability to manipulate bloodlines for their own ends. So I am somewhat convinced that she's probably a Zariel tiefling, and therefore has actual blood ties to the Archdevil herself, and therefore is more susceptible to the things that are happening to her for that reason. She has the tadpole to worry about, check, all the origin characters do. But on top of that, she has to worry about basically a demigod hunting her down. And her connection to this demigod is ongoing, unlike in early access. Now, I could be completely misinterpreting all this, but I doubt it. Why else would Lorien officially say that she has this gift of a machine of fire coursing through her veins, when at some earlier juncture that wasn't the case? And here's another theory I might add to the mix. If she bears the gift of Zariel still, which she does, based on the evidence we have now, it could be that in addition to all the prowess it gives her in terms of combat and rage as a barbarian, it could be that it has some mind control effect that exerts its influence on her as well. Because devils are the ultimate masters of manipulation, tyranny, and order, and what better way to control your slave than to control your slave's mind and steer their thoughts in the direction you want them to go in. Now, this is probably a little bit more far-fetched, but it wouldn't entirely surprise me. It might not be a perfect control thing, but I do suspect that her unstable temper based on this fire machine that she's been given as a gift is related to that. So it might not be a perfect mind control, but rather something that makes her more short-tempered, something that basically lent itself very well to her role as a barbarian soldier in the Blood War, when her only task was to slay as many demons as possible, but makes for rather poor company and poor companionship when she's traveling in a group of normal mortals. And in addition to escaping Zariel, again, I think her story arc, apart from the tadpole, will be getting rid of this infernal machine in her body, and therefore regaining control over her emotions, her thoughts, her mind, and quite possibly her soul. That's another aspect I have to mention here. Devils don't engage with mortals with freebies, especially archdevils, basically demigods. If Zariel has personally chosen you to be an effective soldier and given you an infernal and very powerful gift, I strongly suspect that, and this is the catch here, lords and ladies, that actually Karlach's soul belongs to Zariel, in a not too dissimilar way that Will's soul as a warlock belongs to Mizora, the Cambion. So to summarize, here's what I see ultimately. She has serious anger management issues due to this gift. This is different from what was originally presented to us in early access based on actual dialogue, meaning she will be able to avail herself of this infernal fire machine in the throes of combat and probably can cause more damage. Maybe she can add fire damage to her attacks. Who knows? Could be very interesting, but will also affect her ability to make decisions. Perhaps if you play her as an origin character, she might get penalties on some of her rolls, depending on what the type of roll might be. But ultimately, her soul is in the balance. That's probably the official arc going on here. She still has very much infernal ties to Zariel, because Zariel has effectively, with this machine, branded her for life. And unlike with Will, Zariel is a little bit of a tough cookie to kill and get rid of. So she is in a very difficult situation. Now, all of this is speculative, but it's based on informed speculation. So do let me know what you think. Obviously, one thing that is different, as I pointed out several times, the story she tells you in early access is probably different from the one we're going to get in full release. That's obvious. She is not just relying on muscle and steel now. You can see it in her visuals. Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate your support. Please like the video, share, comment, subscribe if you've not yet done so, as it really helps out the channel. And I'll check you out next time. Take care. Until then, bye-bye.